Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in for Temple Hayes on Fire for Life. And those of you that have been with my show for, I think we're going on 16 years now, know that there's lots of reasons on this planet today that we can have lots of passion, and yet moving past that. We're all from time to time, we're moved about stories. We hear various issues in our world. But what really matters is when you take that energy of recognizing there's an issue and being willing to take a stand for it and literally actually do something about it. So what I like to do, one of the things, aside from actually doing things about stuff that I have a lot of care about, is I love to feature amazing people, difference makers. And today we have the one and only Dennis Pitocco, the founder of 360 Nation, Biz Catalyst. I mean, he and his wife, Ellie, they are movers and shakers. They transform wherever they go. They are electric in every way. And they stay up at night thinking about how can we know we left the world a better place. And joining him is Peggy Willms, who by herself is like a global coach. He supports people and moving from A to B, from A, accepting, to B, becoming something great, something magical. And together, they have come up with the viable solution. As we were talking earlier before we started recording the show, 3 years ago today, actually, Fort Myers, Florida, Cape Coral, that area was totally taken off guard because for a long time we had heard in Tampa Bay the big hurricane is coming. Well, sadly, it did. And it hit Fort Myers and it was tragic. That being said, you can Google it and learn more about that. But that being said, I remember a number of people called me because I own property in Florida, and they would go, "Did you weather through okay? Are you all right?" It said it hit Florida. Like, well, it's kind of sizable, Florida, but I mean, it was kind, it was genuine. I appreciated that they cared. And I would say, "No, it missed us." And their answer would be, "Oh, well, you're in good shape then." And I would say, "No, I'm not," because all my brothers and sisters and all the animals are devastated in Fort Myers. We work every day to move from the me to the we. So we are talking today about Unsheltered. None of us are home until all of us are home. I'm going to say that again, just in case you need to replay it. Unsheltered. None of us are home until all of us are home. Welcome, Dennis and Peggy. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, thanks so much.
Thank you.
So, Peggy.
Yes.
How did this come about?
This came about after I had written 3 books on a compilation anthology books over the past year. And I had thought, if I become the compilation queen of America, where I'd bring together these people and just vessel their stories. And about 15 months ago, about a year and a half ago now, I was at a conference of which you were there as well. And I finally met you in person, and Dennis, my buddy here. It was kind of a capture point, a networking type thing, net weaving we used, of all of us coming together and to do for good. And so we came together in a different event. When I was there, Dennis was talking about how the proceeds from whatever they got from that event were not going to go into his organization. They were going to go back out into the community, and how he spoke about how connected he was to those who are unserved. And while I was walking around Tampa looking for something to eat, as I'm from Punta Gorda, we don't have a huge unsheltered population. And I was walking around Tampa and it hit me, and his statements hit me. On the way home, I thought, it's time for us to write a story about those who are unsheltered from their mouths, change the narrative of what's been going on. So I contacted Dennis and said, "Please write this with me or I'm not going to do it." And the rest is history. Took us 15 months, but Dennis can add.
Yeah, let me just say, over the many years, we've been around over a decade doing what we do for good. And as Peggy knows, we have been approached many, many times. People looking at our audience, they're looking at our visitors on our site, looking at what we're doing, saying, wow, if we could just monetize all that, wouldn't it be wonderful? So I cannot tell you how many times we were approached to do joint venture projects. And every single time we said no, because the purpose didn't align with 360 Nation doing for good. And then came Peggy. And frankly, we just spoke briefly about it. I couldn't say no because the first thing she said was, this is going to be for good, not for profit. And she already knew we were aligned with the unsheltered community. And we're going to come back to that word in a few minutes, why Peggy and I are both focused on that. And call it synchronicity or good karma. We started it right after that, and it's been simply a remarkable, remarkable education for me, and what an experience for us all.
Wow, that's really powerful. What's coming up for me is the quote. I use it a lot. I grow into it the longer I live. There's one thing stronger than all the armies of the world, and that's an idea whose time has come.
Well
And
said.
I'm holding that, and I see that as being this idea, and the broader picture is for people to understand. Every time we talk about something happening in the States, we're talking about the world. If people haven't understood that yet, that's a whole different class on a different day, because we're all sharing the same resources, that's for sure. But I believe you have come up with an amazing idea whose time has come. Back to
Well,
you, Peggy, or
yeah,
back to
Peggy.
you, Dennis.
No,
I like this.
We do this well with each other.
I
yeah.
know, it's great.
I was going to just focus on some of the very fundamentals that Peggy and I agreed on day one, other than for profit, which obviously that was music to my ears. But we wanted to start by doing something totally different, not just do a book for good, but to change the narrative. And you will hear us say that a lot. We've said it over the months. And there's a quote I read long ago by a lady named Jean Houston, and she said, change the story and you change the change perception and you change the world. So we said, all right, day one, we're not going to, it's going to be a book about the homeless because everybody knows what that means, but we're not going to call it homeless. You're not going to see that word on the cover. We're going to go with unsheltered, because, and here's why, because the moment you say homeless, people think of all those headlines they see and all that narrative about they're lazy, they're mentally ill, they're addicted, they're dangerous, and all those myths. So we said, we're going to start by framing this book before we put one story in it, before we talk to one person on the street differently. So unsheltered was going to be the theme, if you will, which frankly, in my experience, having used that now for over the last almost 2 years, homeless brings with it a negative narrative and all these terrible assumptions. Unsheltered brings curiosity. People say, well, what do you mean by that? They know it kind of means homeless, but it's actually a broader context. The second thing we said is it's not going to be an academic book. We're not going to give you statistics. We're not going to give you all those charts that'll just make your eyes glaze over. We want real voices from real people telling these stories, not Peggy and I. And the third thing was, well, actually, there's four things. The next thing was the image. Typically, in my experience, when the media presents what they call homeless, you'll see a black man on the cover missing his teeth, kind of a beard. And it's a caricature of what people think homeless people are supposed to look at. We know that's not true, having spoken with them. And the last thing is, and this goes all the way to the guy that we invited to do the foreword for the book, David Barenbaum. We didn't want it to be just focused on America. We wanted it to be global because it is a global issue. And I'm happy to say in all four areas we were successful. The rest, which was the hard part actually, was bringing on the stories. And Peggy can talk about it. She's gathered stories for years, but this was a little different. I'll turn it back to Peggy.
Thank you, Dennis. I, I, One of the stories that I tell, I actually was telling it in one of my own lives this morning, is the biggest thing I learned from this. There's two. One, the nonprofits weren't our pals, and we can talk more about that in a second. Number two is the profound story when they had said to me, one of the authors had said to me, I don't know why people, when they walk by me, act like they don't see me, see them. I see them looking at me. I see them avoiding me. I see them praying to God I won't ask them for $1. The first part, though, if we want to go into it, Dennis, if you feel comfortable, right now, is the nonprofit situation. I personally have been so disappointed in the nonprofits and the media, quite frankly, in the lack of giving us an opportunity to share their stories in their own home. You know, you're a nonprofit and these people come every day and they're in your sanctuary. And I thought we would go there and we would be safe and we would come in and we would chat with them and sit around the table with John. And we couldn't get, I think, what we were close to 70 or some nonprofits we reached out to, and we had one out of Denver, Colorado, give us his story, which was even more on a personal kind of story that evolved into his nonprofit. But my frustration there, and then since this book, Temple, we've reached out to dozens and dozens of media outlets to discuss this subject, and we're here with you today. We've had a couple of interviews, and that's
so it is
frustrating.
fascinating, and I don't there's several things that you're saying that really hit home. And, you know, one of them is, I don't know if even Dennis is aware, but I dedicated a lot of hours and time. I don't mean that like, look at me. I'm just saying I was involved for more than one conversation with the Homeless Coalition in Pinellas County. And it was shocking to me. And perhaps it's shocking to some of you that are listening, that most homeless are transitional homeless individuals. They are often families with children. They are people in your neighborhood right now that you'll start noticing the tire didn't get fixed, the shutter didn't get repaired, the paint is chipping. It could be an upper scale or middle class or home, and you start noticing it's a transitional type thing where the job didn't work out or they transferred with the company. And you're so right. And you're in my little place. You're in my little hot spot, because I get so wound up about this, because I'm just going to say shame on us. Because shame on us, because we call it a word, and we call a lot of things words like homeless and alcoholic. And we do that because it becomes desensitized and we don't think about it anymore. We can put it out of our awareness, so we don't have to feel an action, a reason to get inspired. We can just go, oh, that's those. I mean, I get that too, as well, you're gay. And I go, well, you know what? You're heterosexual. What does that have to do with anything? These names desensitize us from feeling, from revealing, from taking action. So you're into my hot button today about the homeless for sure. And I have so much energy around that. And just like Arun Gandhi, he died last year. He was Mahatma Gandhi's fifth grandson. And he would say, you see a homeless person on the street, you do your best and strain yourself to pull out $1. Don't ever, I'm paraphrasing, but don't ever tease yourself to think that you've made the person standing on the corner feel better. You're simply trying to cover up your own shame. Bam.
Amen.
Interesting.
Wow.
Amen.
Mic drop. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I look at, I carry this book. It has even lotion marks on my fingers because I refer to it so much. And we were even cautious of the texture of it,
Yes.
the very mesh, feel of suede almost texture. And I do not want us to go any further without mentioning our team. Ron Rampola, who did a lot of the photography photos that are submitted, including the cover. Rocky Michaels, who has done our theme. If you watch Rocky Michaels, the Uncomfortable Truth video, you better have your tissues ready. He allowed us to use his song as our anthem. Teresa Velarde, our team of editors, everybody came forward as, again, for good. All of the profits for this book go back into the communities that serve them, of which our board will decide who that is. But the stories in here, Temple, that are, I was ignorant. I'm just going to say I was ignorant to this subject, the breadth, the breadth of it, the globalness of it, the individuals. I didn't realize our teens, what's going on with our teens. I did an interview in rural Colorado with a gal who works with teens, and they're leaving because they have yucky homes. When they leave the yucky home at 14, 15 years old, the last thing they want to see is CPS take them back home. So they stay undercover on the couches, surfing around in rural Colorado where it's 10 below zero half the year. And, it's stories like that. It's coming out of India. And Issa Theron, who was like, family meant different types of abuses. It didn't mean loving and caring and soccer games. So we have almost 40, I think, Dennis, is that correct?
Yes.
Stories in here, including ours, and we interviewed people, but they signed contracts, Temple. They signed contracts. We didn't take advantage of them. We had agreements with these storytellers. So this wasn't, because we've been accused at some points in time where it's like, you're just taking advantage of this population. It's like, no, we were just a vessel, just a path. But yeah. I'm rambling, but I get fired up.
Well,
No, you're not rambling. You're not rambling. And like you said, and we're somewhat talking around it, there's a lot of nonprofits that are born that are more, they become about the funds than they do going to the actual cause. And we see that a lot, and we don't have to talk around it. It is what it is. And there are viable solutions, but it's like there's too much money and not having those solutions. I mean, the list goes on and on. So I'm not with any particular organization other than my own. So I can just put that out there. It's sad.
Well put.
Really
I'd like to emphasize, and Peggy, you know how I feel about the nonprofits, because we have been roll up your sleeves involved with many of these nonprofits for years. And people ask us, what was your biggest surprise about the book? Two things I would say. Number one is the nonprofits, and surprise and disappointment, because Peggy's right. Almost 70 nonprofits I reached out to. And what's interesting is the one nonprofit that stepped up, we didn't know. It was almost by accident we stumbled into this nonprofit, and guy's name is Blake that runs it. And he's got a marvelous backstory that fits into the book. But it's just so disappointed, because what I learned is, and this is from my own involvement with nonprofits, it's nice to have that pretty vision statement and mission statement, and you're pledging all this to the community. But when the lights go out at 5 o'clock, is the passion still there? And for me to go to a nonprofit and say, look, here's our proposition. You don't have to do anything other than introduce Peggy or me to somebody because you serve that population, and I'll come wherever you are, and I will sit down and I will talk to them. So just put me in the room, put me on the street, put me next to your shelter, and we'll do the rest. And guess what? If you do that, we're going to mention you in our book, and we're going to tell people how to find you, how to volunteer with you, how to donate. So you're going to get free publicity, and we're going to serve the needs of your community. And with a proposition like that, I just can't get my head around, as they say in England, the fact that proposition didn't go to the top of the stack, with one exception. Media, the same story. Why wouldn't you want to come up with this story? Because it changes all the narratives you've been publishing for years, and it shines a different light on the Unsheltered. So, second surprise, and Peggy, you kind of touched upon this. I thought I knew the homeless. I didn't know the homeless or the unsheltered until I spent time on the streets with them. And quite frankly, when I learned so many people I know through our various social media networks, or people that write for us, that they had been homeless at one time in their life, and they were willing to come forward. They had figured out how to get off the street and go mainstream, and they had the courage and the vulnerability to say, yes, I'll tell my story, because people can learn. And by learning, they'll see it's not what you thought it was. And Temple, you started out by talking about some of the things that happen in people's lives. Maybe it's a health condition. Maybe they lose their job. That goes against the other myth. People think that you make a choice to go on the street. And when you start with that assumption, then you have to go with lazy, and all the other things that come with it. And it's unfortunate, but we have spent most of our time in this book, I don't know, unlearning what we thought about the homeless and re-educating people who thought they knew the homeless.
Yeah, I think
It's fascinating, isn't it? Isn't it fascinating? And too, that we live in cultures where, there's tons and tons of food. I mean, I just was almost nauseous when I interviewed the Humane Society International, and I was getting ready to do my sweet speech at the Parliament of the World Religions, and discovered that 1 billion+ lives every year are taken and never make it to a table. And yet we have people starving to death that could access that food, that a life would matter, that a sacred life that was given wasn't in vain. The numbers are just unbelievable because of some kind of liability act, or, something that we can't take the food that goes off out of the kiosk or off the shelf and then transport it, or that it be used for good. There's so much to this. I mean, to what you are unraveling and uncovering, and that's my knowing, is that this is just the beginning of the
Yes.
unsheltered reality, but that it can have a domino effect, and make such a difference to put life back. So anyway, Peggy, you were
well,
in
part
the
of
queue. You were in the
I'm just
queue.
it is something that you brought up, that it touches us, right? So I mean, in this particular interview, when Dennis and I are interviewed, I find that my heart rate is elevated, my anxiousness is up. I'm extroverted, I'm pretty cool chick, I can be cool. But with this subject, even on my live shows, I get so passionate about this subject, I barely take a breath. Doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, children, we're all subject to paychecks away from this situation. And I cried. I mean, we had to stay in touch with each other so much through this project, which took 15 months. And by the way, within 2 hours, it went to bestseller in 4 categories, new release bestseller. So it was very successful out of the gate. But we had to stay in touch with each other. Sometimes he was my Batman and sometimes I was his Robin, and vice versa. And we just, luckily, there wasn't a day really that both of us were down. We were able to kind of piggyback that energy. But it was so emotional. Not only was I frustrated myself that I didn't know some things, the majority of the stories in the book taught me that you're not a drug addict or an alcoholic that then becomes homeless. Many of them learn that on the streets because of their dire needs and their embarrassment and their mental health. We had so much, gosh, 70% of the book, it seems like, was mental health related to these circumstances. And I get fired up by Dennis. Take it while I
Well, there's just so much. There's so
Oh.
much that needs to happen. I mean, I know that there are people becoming homeless even in Tampa Bay. And the governor here in California is, let's eliminate homelessness. People make lofty speeches while at the same time
Right.
they're raising the prices on the housing market, that a person cannot prove 3 times the rent, that they can afford it, and all the restraints that they're putting on human beings now. It makes no sense, whatsoever. It is a place of, get teary, get weary, but then get fiery, right? I mean, but you're right. Once you get into the deeper part of it and you start working with the complexities of the systems, it's really eye-opening.
Well, and I can tell you, as Peggy knows, who's done a number of compilations, this isn't your typical compilation because we had to go where the stories are versus the stories come to us. And I remember my very first encounter where Allie and I were traveling the world. We had just launched this thing with Peggy and we're starting down the path. And I said, we got to get on the street. We were crossing a bridge in Edinburgh, Scotland, on the trip across Europe. We're walking across the bridge. It's a sunny day, and there's a gentleman sitting on the side of the bridge, leaning against a pillar, And he's obviously homeless. He has a cup sitting in front of him. It's a very small cup. And I turned to Ellie and I said, that's probably an indication of his expectations. It's such a small cup. And I did something I've never done. I walked up to him and I said, hello, my name is Dennis. What's yours? And this smile came over his face. This is actually in the book. And I hadn't given him anything. I didn't do anything, but just I saw him. And Peggy touched upon this. And I said to him, he said his name is John. I said, John, help me understand. Why are you smiling? He said, because I'm no longer invisible.
Mm.
Now, obviously, we did put some money in his cup and all that, but that was the beginning of me learning that every time the weight of this project got a little bit overwhelming, I would get back on the street and talk to homeless people because they would lift you up with their spirit. It's just remarkable.
Mhm.
So that kept us going. They served as an inspiration time and time again. And there's so many stories like that I can tell where they just turned around and made it a better day for me versus me making it a better day for them.
Are you aware of the Freedom Singers that found each other on Skid Row in Los Angeles? I shared they're good for you to know. They were runners up with AG&T, America's Got Talent, Freedom Singers, and it would have been either this year or last year. I shared a platform with them a few months ago, and just amazing artists that were on Skid Row.
Yeah.
And met each other. And, by the way, people, just so you know, Skid Row isn't just a place mentioned in Hollywood movies. It's a true place that as far as you can see in either direction, there's tents, there's children, there's babies, there's moms, there's dads, there's partners on both sides of the street, as far as you can point and as far as you can walk. But that being said, so these singers found each other and started doing music together. And they came on America's Got Talent. Look them
Amazing.
up. It's a very touching thing.
I know what you're talking about now.
And it will be
Yes.
very touching to go with your book, or
That's amazing. I know.
when you're doing a TEDx talk and other things that you'll be doing, that you'll have one of their songs playing and tell their story. It's pretty amazing because, again, like Dennis started the show by saying, we create words that we get comfortable with.
That's right.
And we stop thinking about the words. And most importantly, we stop feeling about what the word means. And therefore, we're desensitized. And so anyway, back to you, Peggy Willms.
Thank you. One of our gentlemen, Matthew Broster out of Australia, whose story in the book, he also wrote in one of my other books. He's reached out as a result of this experience he wants me to help him ghostwrite his own book. He is a powerful speaker. His words, very long history of mental health. He started on the streets, running on the streets with the homeless group that now he's got a group going where they actually learn how to run, power walk and run and work and get free shoes. And he'll be honest, he's still struggling with mental health to this second. But it's very much along what you said is Dennis and I learned they are a sense of community. They are their own community. They feel protected. They feel safe. They're not going to hurt us. They tend to actually end up hurting each other sometimes. Dennis, you can speak to that. But we're always afraid. And I mean, what are the stats of a homeless or unsheltered person hurting a civilian? I mean, small, probably, right? But yeah, we've got some of those stories where people go off and do their support groups and kind of build from their dire straits. So yes. You're taking a deep breath, my co-author. How are you doing? It's a lot. I know you pretty well.
It is a lot.
Well, I can remember, and maybe those of you listening can remember, and you can put it in your comments. The first time really you recognized unsheltered issues, homeless people. I was in San Francisco having tea at the St. Francis Hotel in Union Square with wealth all around, meaning the stores, the shops, all the wealth, exports, things exported from all over the world, imported, just that whole Union Square. And I look out, and in the middle of the square are people pushing grocery carts.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm like, what is that? Not is that like it's a that, but just what's going on?
Mhm.
And it was such a dichotomy to see 20 or 30 grocery carts being pushed in this square with all this wealth, all this opulence right around them, and there they are pushing their belongings. And I remember I was going to this expo and I was running a little late, and they wouldn't let me in unless I paid the full price, when all I wanted to do was go to one class. And it was like, I don't know, $200 or $300. And I went, you won't let me just go to this one class? I'm happy to pay, but it doesn't make sense for me to play for the whole weekend. I'm not going to be here. No, we're not going to do it. And I was so upset. And I went, I don't want to live in this. This is not prosperous thinking. So I took the whole amount of money, whatever it was, and I went to a person sleeping on the sidewalk there, and I tapped on the shoulder and kind of startled him. And I said, "This is a brand new day, and I want to share my life and my love with you." And I gave them the money. Um, there's so many things that we can do, little simple acts, little simple ways that maybe make enough of a dent that it can be remembered, for someone to move forward.
Oh, amen. We've said to so many, look, if you walking towards a homeless person, maybe you can't give them money, maybe you can't give them food, but look them in the eye, make them feel seen. If that's all you can do, that's a good step in the right direction. Now, we always say be smart and be careful, because there are some homeless people who have been on the street a long time and they've got their mental challenges, but don't paint the entire homeless community or unsheltered community with that same brush. Step forward. Don't step
Mhm.
around them.
I'm asked, okay, so Peggy, what did you learn? Like, what am I supposed to do now? What's the next call to action? You did this book, and now how can I help? And one of the things I challenge people with always at the end of being interviewed, I just say, just promise me one thing this weekend or this week that you will go and learn this much more information. I don't care if it's one video, if it's one story, if it's one article, research it, Google it. I don't care if you look at the stats in DC. I don't care if you're, something that teaches you a little bit more than you knew yesterday is a step. We're not going to all solve it in seconds, but we can all take a little step. I think a lot of this, Temple, is fear, the unknown, the guilt that we might see in ourselves, like how should I be doing more? When you heard about our book, Temple, what did you first feel about the project? Was it?
Oh,
I'm just curious.
such excitement. And Dennis and Allie and I we're such good friends that it's not surprising that we all, including you, Peggy, not excluding, we resonate at such the same level. And I have been saying that for many, many years. You can go back and find, I'm not just saying that to
Oh,
be
I'm here.
impressive, but you can go back and find a YouTube video 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years ago, when I would say, until all of us are home, none of us are home. I mean, it's a consciousness. So what did I feel about it? Real, raw, deep excitement of an idea whose time has come, and being impressive enough, because when you don't have the monetization factor and you're not concerned with what people think, then you get to say you're guilty, or what's your problem, or you think it's contagious, or you get to be
Hmm.
spot on with the feelings that you have, and address them, because it's like what I have known in my work. And this little book, the right to be you, is about everybody deserves a home, and everybody deserves to pray to whom they want to, and everybody has the right regardless of the color of the skin, and animals need to be treated as sacred, the same kind of thing. All the proceeds have gone to different organizations, but it's like what I have found so much is when you represent an idea or something, people have the tendency to go, yeah, there's just so much that, needs to be done. And what that always tells me is they're not going to do anything. That's a
No, no.
glorified excuse
Mm,
that says, I'm not going to do anything. So I go a step further. Well, if there are so many things to be done, and you're right, what's the one thing that you're going to focus on? They go, what? So I'm just, I'm elated. I feel that with the driver of Biz Catalyst and the authors throughout the world that funnel through, I feel that this book is already and will continue to make a dent. We need to make a bigger dent than the one that we have, because like I said, especially in the States, with the markets going up and up and
mm.
up, people are being pushed out of their homes all the time. And I won't say it's getting better.
No, that's for sure.
I have
won't
a
say it's
question
getting
too,
better.
this isn't to flip the interview. I sincerely respect you in your
You
field.
can flip the interview.
Well, no, Dennis and I have had two major lanes in the world, frustrations, nonprofits and media. And
Yeah.
it just feels like, where we would love to talk to, we've thought about the journalist that's in school in their junior year in college that would love a
Mhm.
project to, and it's an about face or an empty phone. Like, it's not even what are your thoughts about, even the nonprofits, we kind of get it now. Somebody said, don't go in the back door and look at the books. They don't want us in there sometimes, I guess, but media, thoughts on media.
Well, that's a word, for sure, media. But yet there's also some people in the film industry and other places that are about the good,
Mhm.
and they are about the good, and they are about bringing light to things, like what was the film that Will Smith was in, Finding Happiness?
Mhm.
Right? So that's a good film for people to watch about possibilities that aligns with your book. If sometimes I find you can tag it into something else
Yeah.
to add on to make it have more possibilities of going further, that would be, a good thing. But I would look at filmmakers representing causes.
Yeah,
Have you
we got
gone
a
in that?
call.
Have you gone in that direction at all, or have you pursued that?
Take the mic, Dennis.
Well, we did. We were
Okay.
somehow the word got out to some lady who had been in the film industry for a number of years, and she had her own story to tell, being homeless and how she came up. And Peggy and
Okay.
I invested quite a bit of time talking to her, and and Peggy, you'll have to come in here, but we got the feeling after a while that this was less about our mission and more about her spotlight, for lack of a better term. Ultimately, it came to a crash in terms of our discussions about her telling her story, because apparently, and I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, she was talking to, I'm going to make this up, her agent, and felt that she had the ability to get the story told. And I think our book may have stolen some of the spotlight from her in that regard. She wanted to have an exclusive story to be told. And so we gave her plenty of opportunities to come back to us and say, look, the door's open. We want to tell your story. But I think we both concluded that her heart wasn't in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're right, Temple. It's there's a lot out there. It's you got two people that have just, you get tired, right? We need a few troops behind us, I think, and connections, and you're
Well,
listening.
I say you already have those.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I would say is that there was a book, maybe, I don't know, 18 years ago, written by a friend, Ernie Chu, CHU, and it's called Soul Currency.
Mm.
And it's a very intellectual book. You know, I had to really, read and then go meditate and then read some more. I love Ernie, but it was very headsy. But the bottom line is, we did a 7-week program on it, and the bottom line is that we all have soul currency and we don't use it,
Mm.
right? So, for example, in Biz Catalyst, there's what, 750 authors. There's so many people that tune in, that read, that, LinkedIn and stuff like that. You have soul currency. You have people that maybe they haven't read the book yet, but they've read you. And so they already have a buy-in with who you are. And so here's what our vision is in a little 1.5-minute video or written word. This is what Peggy and I would like to achieve, these 3 things. Who do you know? And because then you're working with the soul currency, because we have the tendency, and I've done it too, when we start a new project, it's like brand new day, we're starting all over. We're picking up, hanging up people we've never met in our lives, talking about the purity of our heart. Just go to the people that already know that. Go to the people that already believe that, people that have a track record, or people that have benefited in some way, because they have had a relationship with you. That's what I would do, is I would really maximize on my soul currency. And that's something that, everybody listening to the show today can consider. I've just had a person I've known for many, many years. Again, the market, oh, I can make a lot selling this house out from under you. The owner has the right to do that. You have 6 months to get out. The owner has the right to do that. They get another call. We got too good of an offer. You need to be out by the end of the month. Right? Here's a person that almost was a person that could be in your book. Almost. I mean, I'm talking accomplished. Somebody's helped people all their lives. Somebody's been there. Somebody's been in the industries of things we mentioned earlier. And it's like, use your soul currency.
That's great.
So I think that's an important way to go. I do know, because I work with a lot of movies that matter and films that matter. I've interviewed a lot of filmmakers, and that is that one piece that it takes a lot of money to produce a film. And so, they want to help, but then they go, well, some of them are working 2 and 3 other jobs just to do the films, that really matter. But I know, with all the connections that you have, that there's people out there that would love it that you ask. And that would be what I would do.
I really like what you said, Temple. I think if we look at this book, as step 1 was publish the book. But it's unfortunate, but there is no sell-by date. This is a perpetual, timeless issue. So we set the foundation through education, through the book. And step 2 is, now let's reach out to maybe the same audience or a bigger audience, saying, here's where we need your help.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love
And I
that.
think the people with the soul currency will step forward. Rather than look at the beginning and the end of a project. This was just setting the stage for the next, because we want to create the positive ripples of change beyond the book. And we know
Right.
it can happen. When the light bulb goes off and you're talking to somebody about this book and they actually take the time to read it, their question comes out, like Peggy said, what can I do?
Right.
They want to
And
know,
it's
because
already
we need to
happening.
guide them. I can't presume they know what to do. We need to guide them
Yeah.
or
And
ask
then
for their help.
exactly. And then it moves from somebody that's read a book to actually somebody that's read into a space of action and
Exactly.
is doing some things. I'm gonna email you with somebody that's part of my soul currency. His name is Thomas Lane, and his mother, Helen Hudson Foundation. They have a keen interest in the homeless situation and population. So I will copy you on an email so you can connect with him. and who knows, where it will go or what it will do. But yeah, I
I've
think
never
that
thought of it the way you did. We wrote this so so focused, and we got it done. And I never thought, Dennis, to circle back around to our
Yeah.
same groups, to those who we've sold our brand to, who get us, who love us, who help us, to now go, now we need you.
yeah,
How can you help us? We did that in the beginning, Dennis, when we went out for the book. Like, do we have an editor that want to volunteer their time? Now it's time. I never thought of it.
absolutely, yeah. And that's the whole thing, because the rest of it is either cold calling, or it's people that don't want to be found out. No, we don't want you interviewing anyone here, because you'll find out we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And our vision on the door and our mission statement aren't the same. Like somebody one time was dealing with a friend of mine, and at the funeral of their family, and it was like Jesus, the holy name of something. And they wouldn't give them the time of day. And I went, you might want to reassess the name of your building. I'm sorry, you might need a new brand. But all that said, you already are so established with so many people, and you can't prejudge. Here's what we need. We need a way to get through to media that matters, and we need to blah, 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 and we need to blah, blah, blah. And just state what it is. And there are people that are ready to accept the call and go. And I'm so glad you asked. I think sometimes when we're too quick to say, I'm not looking for monetization, sadly, in our culture, it sounds too good to be true. Or it's like, well, then you don't need my help then, right? And so we do need your help. And it's independent. See, you are independent. The book is what you're asking for help with, not yourselves. You have established yourself with people, and that brand is intact, but you're doing the work for the book and what it represents. And that's a very big distinction. It's the work, really.
Yep. Well put.
Mm-hmm.
He's spinning. I always know when he's grabbing a pen.
I know. And he rubs the top
This is
of
what
his
it
head.
equates to. This is what
I
it
know.
equates to. The angle of his head soon will be a text or an email to me going, let's go, girl. What are we going to do?
That's right. And he starts rubbing his hair on the top.
He does.
Well, my mind's going a mile a minute, and I do have a tablet full of notes here, but there's just one quick story I want to tell you about this book, because, we can talk about the nonprofits and our disappointments in the media, but then I go back to the stories, and beyond John in Edinburgh, the gentleman that I first talked to, and when this started, I came back to Tampa, and I went down on the streets of Tampa, and I met with a lady. Her name is Sister Mary, and sat with her for about a half an hour. She's home, been on the streets for 30 years. And what distinguished her from everybody else I spoke with on the street is she intends to stay on the street. She wants to be on the street, and she's there for a purpose. And they call her Sister Mary because she carries a Bible. And what she said to me is, and she's such a friendly, uplifting person, and she knows everything. She knows where to eat. She knows where to sleep. She knows where you can get educated. She knows how you can get off the street. She's got connections, but she doesn't choose them for herself, because she said to me, there are people on the street that are drug addicts. There are people, alcoholics. And she said, and there are people that are just on the street, not by choice, but by accident. I will help every one of them get off the street on one condition: they sit with me and find their faith. She opens the Bible and she sits with them, and she said that will be the beginning of their journey. Now, what's interesting, I spoke with her about a year. One of my first stories I wrote was my interview with her, and I said, Mary, I'm going to come back and find you someday once this book is out, because I want you to have it. And a year went by, and we're traveling, and finally the book came out a couple of months ago. And about 2 days after the book came out, my phone rang, and I had no idea who was talking to me, and it was Mary. I had no idea how she found my phone. She seems to know everybody. And she said, Mr. Dennis, I just wanted to check to see how the book's coming along. We agreed to meet that weekend. I grabbed the book, took it down to her. And she grabbed my hand and she took me across the street and she wanted to introduce me to all her friends who were homeless because for that one day, she was the star of the show. She was in a book. She then took the book and she's now texting me once a week and giving me updates. She took it to a church because she volunteers as an usher and they let her read from the book. So, I mean, it
Oh
just
my
goes
gosh.
on. So Mary is now a friend of ours, and she got in touch with me, said she'd like 4 more books to give her to her friends. Do we have any hardcovers? Because out in the rain, they get all wrinkled. I said, Mary, I'll bring 4 books to you. We'll work it out. So Allie's now sealing the books in plastic, and we're going to take them to her.
So awesome.
But she's one of those, I mean, she's working on the street to get people off the street. Amazing.
That's a beautiful story. And how one person can make a difference.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
wow.
Well, I'm just, you've lit me up. Let me know anything I can do or what that is, or if you just want someone every now and then to interview you on how it's going, I'm thrilled to
Well,
do it.
you know,
And honored to be part of your path. And yeah, there's doors that will open, and writing the book, it will wind up being, it will turn out to be the easiest part.
You're
Because
probably
now
right.
it's taking a fire, it's having kindling, it's keeping it lit. But it doesn't have to be hard. That's for sure, because it is an idea whose time has come.
Absolutely.
And you just keep moving with it, and keep each other close with this endeavor. And it's just been such a pleasure having you on the show. You literally, truly are on fire for life. And I'm just glad that you have taken this on. It's such a great need. And I want to give both of you an opportunity to say something on your heart before we go off the show today.
Ladies first.
Ladies first. Thank you, sir. I would just say that just let's educate ourselves just a little bit. Like I spoke earlier, we are one love. We are connected. We are not above each other. None of us are home till all of us are home. And that's what I'm trying to live by, is in my center, put my brain aside a little bit, and what feels right in the intuition and loving others. It humbled me greatly. We got together with this after Hurricane Ian came through. And I thought, I lost a lot of things. And then I realized after this book, I need like 15 shirts. That's about it. And, it just simplified my life. It humbled me greatly, and it smacked me upside the head. And so I am on fire for this. And I thank you, Temple, for your words.
No, and I bless you for that. And I want to remind everybody, you can go online and you can buy right now, Unsheltered. None of us are home until all of us are home. Dennis, what about you?
Thank you. I'm going to start where Peggy and I started, and that is, if you think you know the unsheltered or the homeless, buy this book. And remember, we say buy this book. Any profit or proceeds over the cost are going right back into the homeless community. So read the book, because we know if we can change the narrative, one human being, one person on the street, one voice at a time, it's a small ripple of change, but it does work. And second thing is, as I said earlier, when you're walking on the street and you see a homeless, don't step around them, step forward. And if all you can give them is eye contact, you've accomplished something. Just do it.
They want a hand up, not a handout.
Absolutely.
That's right. That's right. Hand up, not a handout. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I would urge you, please hit share and forward this message with other people and people that matter to you. And send it also to people that don't matter to you. Whichever way you go, just hit share. Thank you for being with us. Such a pleasure.